When an actress named Dinah served Barron Trump at a quiet cafe, she expected nothing more than a change of pace. Instead, what he left behind, a note and a generous tip, brought her to tears and sparked a national conversation. The aroma of espresso mixed with the subtle scent of fresh pastries filled the air. The afternoon shift had stretched longer than usual, and the sound of conversation in the cafe had finally subsided to a murmur. To Dinah, the shift felt like a marathon. Each tap on the cashier's keypad felt slow. Each step was just another reminder that she'd been on her feet for hours. She cleared the last table by the window and checked her phone. Just one more hour. The rent was 2 days late, and the cell phone bill was unpaid. The news that day was not good, especially a small change she had desperately made for the dinner of busy sponsors who never checked their phones. Dinah took a deep breath, pulled her hair into a tighter bun, and picked up her order pad. Her manager, an older woman with tired eyes, gave her a look that seemed to say, "Get it together," but Dinah was already in automatic mode. Then the bell above the door rang. The sound brought her back to focus. A young man walked in, tall, elegant, dressed in an airplane t-shirt and shoes that made him look out of place. 2 men followed close behind, blending almost seamlessly into the darkness. The eyes of everyone in the room turned to them. The cafe wasn't exactly a celebrity haunt. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to see someone with bodyguards. For a moment, Dinah hesitated, her pencil dropping to the order pad. But professionalism took over, and she walked over to the table where the young man had sat. "Good afternoon," Dinah said, trying to put on her best smile. "Can I get you something?" The young man looked at her, and for a moment, Dinah almost forgot what she was supposed to say. His face was striking, but there was something familiar about him. His features, the small calm in his expression. Then it hit her. Barron Trump. Dinah had seen his face plastered all over the news for years. Son of the former president. She felt her heart race, but she did what she was trained to do. She remained calm. This was a client, nothing more, nothing less. "I'll just have a cappuccino, and maybe one of those croissants," Barron said softly. His voice was modest but reserved. "Absolutely. Anything else?" Dinah asked. "That will be perfect." "Thank you," he replied. His words were simple, but his tone held something Dinah couldn't quite place. Kindness, perhaps, or just sincerity. She took the order, turned around, and tried to control the nervousness in her neck. She wasn't sure if it was nerves or exhaustion, but something about that moment stuck with her. As Dinah prepared the coffee, she couldn't help but look at the table. She didn't know anything. That small interaction was about to turn her entire day, and maybe her week, on its head. The hiss of the cappuccino machine filled the air as Dinah frothed the milk. She kept her movements deliberate, calm, but there was nothing she could do to distract herself from the strange, nervous energy settling in her neck. "Why am I acting like this?" she thought. Barron Trump. Of all people. His eyes drifted to the table. He was sitting quietly, his posture straight but not rigid. He wasn't fiddling with his phone or typing on a computer like most of the other customers. He was simply staring out the window, lost in thought. Every now and then, he drank water from the glass he had left earlier. When the cappuccino and croissant were ready, Dinah approached the table. "Here you go," she said, placing the cup and plate in front of him. He looked up and smiled slightly. "Thanks. You're welcome. Let me know if you need anything else," Dinah replied, keeping her tone neutral but polite. As Dinah walked back to the counter, something made her pause. Maybe it was the feeling that his eyes were still on her, curious but not invasive, or maybe it was just her own exhaustion kicking in. Either way, her heart fluttered again. Minutes passed, and Dinah busied herself clearing empty tables and refilling sugar bowls. The cafe had gone silent again, except for the soft sound of background music coming from the speakers. She felt the weight of the room in a way she never had before, as if something invisible was pressing against her, urging her to pay attention. Stepping out into the hallway, Dinah noticed that Barron had pulled a pen from his pocket and leaned over the table as his coffee was finishing. He wrote something quickly, almost as if he didn't want anyone to notice, folded the paper neatly, and placed it under the empty coffee cup. Then he stood up, gathering up his phone and jacket. Dinah watched him for a second before forcing herself to focus. Thank you for coming, she said softly as he passed. Barron turned slightly and smiled. Have a good day, he replied. That sentence lasted longer than it should have. Dinah stood there, frozen in the middle of the cafe, her eyes following him as he left with his security guard close behind. The bell above the door rang one last time, and then the room was silent again. She let out a slow sigh, picked up her order pad, and went to clear the table. The cappuccino cup was empty, with a faint residue of foam on the rim. Next to it, the plate of croissants was bare but crumbs. And there it was, the note. Dinah picked it up carefully, the folded paper feeling heavier than it should have. Her first thought was the tip. She might have been generous, but that wasn't uncommon with wealthy customers. They usually left cash to avoid interaction, but as she unfolded the note, the air in her lungs disappeared. At the bottom, below the total, was a number, a tip so large it made her stomach sink. 4 digits. And on top, a handwritten note. Your kindness and hard work do not go unnoticed. My family is with you. Stay strong. Brighter days are ahead. Dinah's hands began to shake. She read the words again, this time more slowly, letting each sentence sink in. Her eyes drifted to the doorway where Barron had disappeared, and her vision blurred as hot tears filled her eyes. Her legs felt weak. She backed away to the empty chair where he had sat and just stared. The note, the tip, it wasn't about the money. It was the words. The weight of empathy written by someone she never imagined would notice her existence. For the first time in weeks, even months, Dinah felt seen. As tears streamed down her face, she thought about what those words meant. But this moment wasn't over yet. Someone else would see the note, and Dinah's story was about to spread far beyond the walls of the cafe. The sound of the cafe door opening brought Dinah back to reality. She quickly wiped her tears with the back of her hand, tucking the note into her apron as her manager approached. Are you okay? The manager asked, her eyes full of concern. What happened? Dinah hesitated for a second, trying to find the right words. I'm fine, she said, though her face was still damp. Just a very generous tip. The manager raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Generous enough to make you cry? Dinah laughed, trying to maintain her composure. Yes, it was Barron Trump. Barron Trump? The manager looked incredulous. Are you serious? Yes, Dinah replied, taking the note from her apron. But it's not just the money. She handed the note over carefully, as if it might fall apart in her hands. The manager read it, and for the first time in months, Dinah saw genuine softness in her eyes. Wow, the manager exclaimed, handing back the bill. This is something different. It really is. Dinah agreed, keeping the note as if it were a treasure. I don't even know why he wrote that. I didn't do anything special. The manager looked at her for a moment. Sometimes people just know, Dinah. They can see what you're going through, even when you think you're hiding it. You're here every day, working hard, always kind to customers, even the ones who don't deserve it. Maybe he saw that. Dinah felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For months, she'd been struggling, working 2 jobs to pay the rent, scrimping on food to make sure she could cover her mother's prescriptions. She was kind because it was the only part of her that hadn't let the world take her away. And somehow, he'd seen that. Minutes later, a strange buzz filled the cafe. A couple of co-workers were pointing to the table where Barron had sat. Word spread quickly, and it wasn't long before one of the co-workers approached her. You served him, didn't you? The girl asked, her voice somewhere between anxiety and disbelief. What did he say? Was he kind? Dinah smiled softly. Yes, he was very kind. Man, I would have freaked out, laughed the colleague. That's so crazy. Dinah didn't say anything else. She didn't want to explain the note or the tip. Somehow, sharing it felt like taking something sacred and putting it on display. For now, it was hers. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Every interaction felt lighter somehow. Every table she cleaned felt a little easier. When she finally took off her apron at the end of the day, the folded note remained securely in her pocket. As Dinah walked to the subway station, she found herself holding the note again, staring at the words. My family is with you. Stay strong. Brighter days are ahead. She felt the weight of the words in her chest, as if saying them out loud made them real. He didn't have to write this, she thought. He didn't have to care, but he did. And as the train hurtled through the tunnels, Dinah closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, for the first time in a long time, that maybe things could get better. But what Dinah didn't know was that this silent moment was about to resonate much louder than she had imagined. The note wouldn't remain a secret for long. The next morning, the sun had barely begun to stream through Dinah's apartment window when her phone began to vibrate on her nightstand. She groaned, turning to check it. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen. "Why is everyone texting me?" she muttered, scrolling through the messages. "Girl, is that you? You're famous. Is this real?" His thumb stopped on a message that included a link. It was a screenshot of a story from the Daily Post. Barron Trump leaves touching note and big tip for Waitress. Dinah sat up in bed, her heart pounding as she clicked on the link. The article told the story word for word. A waitress in trouble, an unexpected customer, a sympathetic note, and a tip that seemed to change her life. The attached photo was of the note itself, written in Barron's elegant handwriting. Dinah's hands shook as she read. "How did this happen?" she whispered, scrolling through the messages. Another message from a coworker read, "The guy at table 5 yesterday? Someone must have seen the note and taken a picture. It's everywhere now." Her heart sank. Everywhere? She opened her social media accounts, and sure enough, there it was. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the note had gone viral. Hundreds of comments appeared. "This is what the world needs more of. Barron Trump seems like such a gentle soul. I don't care what anyone says. This is beautiful. I hope the waitress is okay." The more Dinah read, the more she felt like strangers were discussing her story, her life, without knowing anything about her. She put her phone away and buried her face in her hands. "What do I do now?" she whispered. The sound of the toaster in the kitchen brought her back to reality. She couldn't lose her mind over this, not with bills to pay and groceries to buy. But even as she grabbed her bag and hurried to work, the knot in her stomach remained. She wasn't ready for her story to belong to the world. The cafe was different that day. When Dinah walked in, she immediately felt eyes on her. Her coworkers were smiling in a way they never had before. Ready, almost. A couple of regulars were looking over their coffee cups, as if trying to confirm that she was the waitress in the article. Her manager greeted her with a wide smile. "You're a local hero now," the manager said. "I don't feel like a heroine," Dinah muttered. "You should," the manager said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What happened yesterday was special, Dinah. Not everyone gets the chance to be a part of something like that." The words should have comforted her, but instead Dinah felt exposed. She wasn't special. She was just a waitress doing her job. And Barron Trump, he hadn't done it for the attention. As she took off her apron and got to work, Dinah felt the weight of the world's eyes on her, even though they weren't physically there. She spent the morning answering questions from customers and coworkers, forcing a smile when people mentioned that young man or what he wrote to you. It wasn't until lunch that things came to a head. A news crew pulled up outside the cafe. Cameras, microphones, everything. "Really?" Dinah groaned as she watched the reporters approach the entrance, talking to her manager. Her stomach turned when one of the reporters saw her and waved politely. "You're the talk of the town," a coworker whispered. "Lucky me," Dinah muttered, pushing away from the counter and picking up her phone, scrolling through the latest news. The comments flooded in faster than she could process. That note probably saved her life. This is a lesson in kindness. People, little gestures mean everything. More stories like this, please. Amidst the chaos, Dinah felt a small hope. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about kindness. About people remembering that small acts could still make a big difference. But Dinah still had a decision to make, and it would determine how the story ended. When her shift finally ended, the cafe felt more stifling than ever, crammed under the weight of attention. She slipped out the back door, avoiding the news crew still camped outside. The moment her feet hit the sidewalk, she let out a sigh, as if she were expelling her invisible eyes. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. The streets felt unfamiliar now, as if the world had moved away a little. Dinah clutched her purse tightly. The note was still safely inside. Your phone vibrated. Another message. Dinah, they want you on the morning TV show. Call me. It was her manager. Dinah stopped walking. Her feet were planted on the sidewalk. The thought of going on television made her skin crawl. Talk? Tell her story? No, that wasn't her. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to talk. But that night, as Dinah stared out the window of her apartment at the starry sky, her phone vibrated again. She didn't need to check it to know what it was. More people, more questions, more noise. But beneath it all, the note was still tucked away in her pocket, a tangible reminder that someone out there, someone unexpected, had seen her struggle. For the first time in a long time, Dinah didn't feel invisible. The next day, Dinah made a decision. She called her manager. Tell the morning TV show I will, she said calmly. Are you sure? Asked the manager, surprised. Yes, but I'm not going to talk about the money. I want to talk about the note. About kindness. That's it. The interview was simple. Dinah sat in the studio, her hands folded nervously in her lap as the presenter approached. Dinah, you've been in the spotlight these past few days because of something quite unexpected. A note and a tip from Barron. Can you tell us how you felt when you first read the note? Dinah paused, choosing her words carefully. Honestly, it took me by surprise. It wasn't about the money. It was about what he wrote. I was going through a hard time, and those words meant more than I can explain. The presenter nodded, excited. The note read, Your kindness and hard work do not go unnoticed. My family is with you. Stay strong. Brighter days are ahead. What do you think he meant by that? Dinah looked directly into the camera, feeling as if she was talking to every person watching, not just the host. I think he meant that we all struggle. It doesn't matter who we are or where we come from. And sometimes, when we're at our lowest, the smallest act of kindness can change everything. It reminds us that someone sees us and that we're not alone. The studio was silent for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The presenter smiled gently. That's a beautiful message, Dinah. Is there anything you'd like to say to Barron if he's watching? Dinah's voice shook a little, but she smiled. Just thank you. Not for the money, but for seeing me. For reminding me to keep hope. You made more of a difference than you know. When the interview aired, Dinah didn't look at her phone. She didn't check the comments or the news. Instead, she went back to work the next day. The atmosphere in the cafe was different. The customers smiled in a way that seemed more genuine, not because they knew her story, but because she felt seen. People left kind notes on napkins, left slightly larger tips, or simply said thank you with a sincere heart. Dinah kept Barron's note tucked away in her purse, where it would stay for years. It was a reminder that small gestures matter, that you never know how much hope a few words can bring. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. Maybe it's a kind word, an outstretched hand, or simply letting someone know they matter. Who can you help today? Remember, brighter days are ahead for all of us. Sometimes we just need a reminder. Dinah moved on with her life with a new perspective. She knew her story had touched many people, but most importantly, it had touched her. She felt stronger, more seen, and more hopeful. And amidst the chaos and attention, she found new strength to move forward, knowing that even in the most difficult times, there would always be someone willing to reach out and offer a little kindness.